Hi, I'm Rob Laidlaw, and I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober now for 5.5 years. Dry date is July 11, 2015. And the primary reason for my dismissal or abstinence of alcohol, I was having alcohol-related seizures. So my very last alcohol-related seizure was at my mom's memorial. My mother had passed, and I was standing up to deliver her eulogy, and I proceeded to bail through the chairs, flop around on the ground, flopping like a fish, in front of my family for the first time, because this wasn't my first seizure. It was my third seizure in 6 years. And these seizures aren't petit mal, they're grand mal seizures. They obviously I'd never seen myself what it actually looked like, but from what I was told, it looked as though I was dying. And they last, a good minute or more. So what occurs when you seize is literally everything in your body clenches. So you lose facility of, and whatever you're holding, or say for instance if you're driving, there's a good chance that you would have literally driven off the road or into somebody and killed yourself and or somebody. So it was just dumb luck that I didn't kill myself or anyone in any of the 3 seizures I had. So that was the moment of, they call it in addiction, your aha moment, you're hitting your bottom. So that was the moment for me, right? My sisters have said and referred to this to me over the years, that this was my mother's last act on earth, was to either take me with her or shake me awake. And I prefer to think that it's the latter, that it shook me awake. And it certainly was a scenario where I couldn't look the other way any longer, right? Addiction had completely governed every aspect of my existence. It had become paramount in my life, more important than relationships and working. I mean, every aspect of the hierarchy of what constitutes a life had been overshadowed by my addiction. So that was my end. My beginning started, quite. It's not a remarkably unique story. I mean, from my 5.5 years in sobriety, having befriended, talked to all kinds, hundreds of alcoholics, and that was primarily my drug of choice. But I was sort of up for anything when I got drunk, meaning whatever substance was placed before me. Started though at quite a young age. Real quick, my dad was a psychiatrist, interestingly, but died of alcoholism. And so, I mean, there's a phrase that is bandied around the rooms: you shake any family tree and alkies fall out. And I think that that's truly the reality of life, is that we humans are prone to addiction, and this is probably the number one addiction on the planet. And it's escapism. It's it literally it touches on all the elements of what addiction helps us do, which is escape from reality. And sadly, though, alcohol and drugs are the escapism that can take you out of existence. So I started at a young age. I won't get too deep into the hows and whys. Just know that I'm a professional musician, and by the time I was 15, I was performing in bands in and around the Toronto area in clubs. And I mean, one of the reasons we perform music is well, not necessarily one of the reasons we perform music. One of the reasons we enjoy music so much is that it literally takes us away from some of the struggles that we may experience in life. And oftentimes music is performed in bars and clubs and larger venues. But my exposure to it in the early days were in clubs, and it was also alloyed to alcohol. And so I had access. I had the means because I was performing there. Oftentimes, one of the methods of compensation to bands starting out is booze. And so depending on how popular of a band you were, meaning the amount of people you could draw to your event, the club owners would rate you in terms of, well, that band's worth a 12-pack, that band's worth a 2-4, so on and so forth. So drinking became a way of getting into the mood. You often hear people say, oh, I'm just a social drinker, and events when you go to clubs and bars, and certainly when you enjoy your favorite bands, it's a social event. So all of these sort of terms, this language, sort of diminishes the fact that you're consuming alcohol. And alcohol, the science is very clear, if you use it repeatedly, you will need more to achieve the desired effect, right? So subsequently you become dependent on it, and again, it's always under the guise of, I'm just having a couple of beers with my pals. In my case, I was performing every weekend at a very young age in these environments, and it was totally acceptable to just have a couple of beers before you went on, certainly have a couple of beers afterwards, and a year flies by and you realize that you're drinking almost every day. So your body develops a dependency, and by the time I was 19, I had a good 5 years of seasoned drinking under my belt, and I was also starting to rise in the music industry in terms of what this was that I wanted to do for a career and a living. And enter sort of the benchmark things, which was acquiring a record deal with the band I was with, and going on larger tours, and so being compensated monetarily, but also the level of the alcohol and drug compensation increased as well. So by that point, though, I was a pretty seasoned alcoholic, undeniably. So entering into my 20s, met and married a gal, started a family, but was completely entrenched in the alcohol culture of if I was feeling stress, get drunk. If I was feeling happy, get drunk. I mean, literally any occasion was a good occasion to drink. So problematic. During that period in my late 20s, my father passed from alcoholism. So that should have been, one would think, a wake-up call. But I always was able to justify my drinking. And my dad wasn't just a psychiatrist, he was the head of psychiatry at a hospital down in Toronto. So he had displayed to me and was exemplified the term functioning alcoholic, which I sadly inherited, because I was able to perform and get the job done, as it were, under almost any level of intoxication. So I always used to kind of joke, on any given night when I'd be looking at my hands and I'd feel like I'd miscalculated my dosage. Now, sadly, what I would do in those instances often is counteract the effects of alcohol with cocaine, because cocaine tended to level you out. So, as you can imagine, the spiral of addiction just was, just exploded exponentially. And by the time I was, so now at this point, though, my kids are, entering their teen years, and all kinds of sort of shameful, too many examples to get into. Never was arrested for drunken driving, dumb luck there. Proceeded to function at a very high level in the Canadian music industry. Played with all kinds of bands that Again, probably had a number of functioning alcoholics in the band, but again, as long as you weren't falling over on stage, as long as you weren't a complete donkey show, we all kind of looked the other way. Turned a cheek, blind eye, all of those cliches. And it wasn't until 13 years ago now, I was working with a really popular 80s band, and I was doing a huge event, and I hadn't had a drink yet that day. But by this point, I'd say by my early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, I was drinking every day. So the notion of it being social had long gone away. It was intrinsically part of my everyday existence. I would sort of temper my day drinking as to when it was appropriate to openly drink. Often at a lunch, I could introduce a pint. By mid-afternoon, if I did a lot of studio work, and at the time I actually co-owned a studio, I could literally go, hey, anyone up for a beer around 3-4 in the afternoon? You know, that whole cliche, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So once the day it became acceptable to start drinking, I would. Anyway, when I had my first seizure, should have been a massive wake-up call. And the very first thing that happens when you have a seizure is, and this is something that I experienced at the hospital when I was taken to the hospital. I'd also hurt myself pretty badly, but not killed myself. I had just fallen on my wrist, inverted my wrist, which could have put my entire career in peril, because it was, my hands are how I have made my living. Anyway, I'm in the hospital, and they immediately take your driver's license away. So at the age of 42 or 43, I found myself licenseless, and which, I've been driving since I was 16 years old, my entire life, right? So you don't actually really, you can't comprehend the notion of not driving until you're facing it and you're not driving. It robs you of your ability to, really simply freedom. It was quite a remarkable thing. But because of the fact I was in a popular band, I had people hangers-on, traditionally called groupies, male and female, that would be of service to me in almost any way I wanted. And I'm not getting greasy or anything. I'm just saying they would drive me. They would come to the shows. And all I had to do was get them backstage and da-da-da. And it would also enable me to continue the cycle of varied abuse, primarily alcohol, and most of the time cocaine was the main thing, because again, it was that sort of toxic balance of, if I was getting a little too drunk, the cocaine would level me off, and then it would allow me to drink more, but it would also allow me to function, i.e. perform, for a period of time, which would, again, just an absolute, it was insanity. But for a couple of years after that initial seizure, had another seizure. Again, just dumb luck. I wasn't standing on a stage where I could have fallen and broken my neck, or driving where I would have potentially killed someone else, harmed other people. It was a series of really, you want to talk about luck in life. It's lucky that I'm alive. But continue to drink. So sadly, the addiction, again, was paramount, was far more important than my marriage, my relationships, my business relationships. And I would receive texts from the leader of the project I was in, and him saying things like, I'd wake up in the morning and he'd say, if you're ever that blasted on stage again, you'll never be on stage again with me. To which I was in complete denial, and I just, this guy's overreacting. I would avoid the topic because, I'd stay sober for maybe the next show, or not as drunk for the next show. So anyway, it was just, again, there was this spiral and this cycle of abuse, which I had managed to, as dysfunctional as it was what I was used to, and it was what I had made it through my life to this point in time. So I was even so delusional that I had the notion, because everyone was saying to me, like, you gotta stop, right? Like you are killing yourself. You will kill yourself. My doctor was saying that I was killing myself. My liver enzymes were through the roof. But I had this fear. I mean, so much of what we do in life is fear based, and I had this fear that I wouldn't be creative. I wouldn't, I came to the realization that I hadn't really had sex sober ever in my life. So I wouldn't be able to, that aspect of my existence would be completely shot. So basically it had become a massive crutch on every aspect of my being. So I was holding on to my addiction like grim death, but sadly it was killing me. So it was finally, as I say, July 11, 2015, I had been fired from the last job I had. My marriage was done. My children were exasperated with the type of person I had become, and my relationships were implicitly superficial and based on basically partying and getting drunk, and then I had the last seizure. So when I went into the hospital, I'm on the gurney. Again, I knew the drill. I knew what the circumstances were, why I was there. But the doctor looked at me and looked at my chart, and it was just an emergency room doctor. And he said, "You're drinking a lot." And I said, "Yeah, well, no, not so much." He goes, "You're probably doing drugs too." And I completely denied that. And he looked at my chart and he just said, "You're not going to live into your 50s. Have a great day." And threw the chart down on my gurney. And again, just dumb luck. I hadn't hurt somebody badly or myself at that point. And that was it. My daughter and my son were there, and my ex-wife and my best friend and my sister, who had lived abroad and was unaware of the depth of my alcoholism specifically. And that was it. I literally checked into a rehab. That was on a Saturday. On the Monday, I checked into a rehab, and I grinded through the first month. I went cold turkey. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, continued to smoke for 6 months into my sobriety. But at that point, I started going to therapy, started going to group therapy, addictions counseling, and then I also ended up going to the more traditional 12-step meeting scenario. And sort of the combo platter of those things, coming to terms with the fact that addiction and alcoholism ran in my family. And I was firmly, I could not look the other way. I was an alcoholic, and it was governing every aspect of my life, and had essentially stolen everything away from the positive things in my life. And the irony of alcoholism is that, you think you're socializing, you think you're in a group of people having this great experience, and then you find yourself completely isolated. I'll never forget, it was the summer before I had my last seizure, the winter before my last seizure, and I was out west. I was in a room full of people, partying at the end of the show, really successful show, and I was thinking, this is what I worked for my whole life. And it was like this epiphany. I'm sitting there with the last drink of my night, knowing that I was blasted. I certainly didn't need it, and a thought just popped into my head, and I didn't care if I lived or died. And in that moment, I thought, wow, I don't think I've ever felt so isolated, so alone. And that was basically the very, a few months later is when I had my last seizure. And as I say, today, where I find myself today, still broken, flawed, and lost, but I certainly feel I'm ready for embracing whatever may be coming. I feel the clarity that I had never, that I hadn't felt since I was a very young person. I've been reinvigorated in terms of all of the things that I love about the uniqueness of what I offer in this world, and I also have found myself in the most meaningful relationship of my life, and also prepared to roll up my sleeves and be the kind of person I want to be, because I always felt I had a good heart. My dad always had a good heart. It was just a tragically flawed heart, and the way we chose to contend with that flaw was maladaptive on every level of analysis. So Today, I don't desire alcohol. I don't have the compulsion for it, and it does go away. So that's my story. Thanks for having me, Jake.